Hollis Hodson. We're doing these little video vignettes. I love to do them. And you are getting such a positive response. We've done a couple so far. Folks, please go to the website listed at the bottom of this interview and check out the responses and the videos to Hollis. Obviously, join all of her various social media platforms. This has been a ton of fun getting nice responses because we're going through the platform sort of categories that you are presenting to the public, and those are also listed on the website and linked to previous videos. Okay, and so but before we get into that, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, absolutely great. Yeah, weather's back again, so that's fantastic. Yeah,
As a
great.
first-time candidate, I cannot believe how busy you are and how much energy you have. Okay, so that's fantastic. Extraordinary amount of energy. You're knocking on doors. Uh, what I want to emphasize to folks as we begin this dialogue, I'm your neighbor. I've been around here almost as long as you have, right in the middle of Saanich. And you've been involved with so many things, okay? Like you've got so much experience in a community activity. It's just ridiculous. And I think people really need to get to know that. It's all listed on your website, but you may wish to do a very quick sort of overview. You've been involved with literally every community associate, and not just involved, you lead them. You develop policy. You present to council. You're involved with policy decision right across the board. There is no better candidate qualified to be a Saanich municipal candidate. So, Hollis, why don't we start off with there? Let briefly your experience that qualifies you to do this job.
Great question. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. So 22 years solidly involved. And long before that, I was founding everything from slow pitch leagues and doing adult sports. I have always been a volunteer. Even in my profession, I would be on conference advisory boards, for Project World and whatnot. So I am someone who really enjoys the challenge of learning, but more importantly, want to make a difference and love giving people a voice, because not everybody is comfortable with public speaking and being in front of. But that leadership piece it really is close to my heart. But 22 years in Saanich, advocating and speaking in front of council, bringing issues to their attention, and for the most part, getting traction. Although the last 4 years, that voice has been quite heard less and less as we kind of carve away at the public input portions of meetings and, the ability to respond. And
Yeah.
that's, one of the factors that's led me to running as a candidate in the upcoming
Well, I
election.
think that's something we'll emphasize at the beginning of every interview, your deep, deep experience and qualifications to do this job. A second thing that was just shocked me, not shocked, startled me, startled is the word, is just how easily you've taken up knocking on doors. Like I do a ton of public speaking, I do a ton of these things. I'm all over the place. I don't know if I could knock on doors. That takes a ton of courage. It is a prerequisite to being a politician. So congratulations. But you've sort of been reflecting with me or summarizing the odd time here and there, just what people are saying. And I think every week we should do a few minutes. You just summarize what are people saying at the doors. Hey, isn't that actually is a good podcast title?
People saying at the doors, it is too. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely, absolutely. There's definitely themes, when I'm knocking, and I ask people, what's important to. I don't just tell. I want to hear from people. I want to elicit from them what's important. And sometimes it takes a minute for that sharing to start, because it's courageous for them to just talk to someone at the door as well. So I hold space for each person in kindness and respect to have a fulsome conversation. And then what I hear from people is passion and response. So the environment is really, really important to people. most of the pillars that I have, housing affordability. And there's that's a full range on, we've talked about attainable housing and affordability. A lot of the seniors recognize that the struggles that they're having to keep it are the same, a different side of the coin for the struggle that young professionals are having in wanting to break into the market. So that's really tough because a lot of people are very, very anxious and frightened about what that's going to look like in the future for them and for their children in the long run. The other things, the environment, urban tree canopy, climate change. Oh, I stumbled over that one. Climate change, all of these things that we're starting to see effects of, right? Things like people coming forward and saying, should it be a right? And it probably should, for people to cool. It used to be a right for people to heat. So there's CVAT groups that meet with me, and they're proposing these things that are really broad strokes in policy that require some deep thought and support. The other thing that people at the doors really talk about a lot, and it's funny, it comes up cautiously under the bike lanes. And people are really unhappy everywhere across the board, many of whom are bikers who are uncomfortable with the bike lanes, still choose to use sidewalks. A lot of people are very confused about what the grand plan is. Is there a grand plan? Because things are very disconnected. I think a lot of the bikers would agree with that too. Like, what is the key areas that we're going to move around on? Because if we're just firing them off on side streets, that's not working, right? The Grange is a great example of that. No one's biking their little child all the way up Grange. It's not possible. They're still going to be on Marigold. And last Friday, I had several letters through the community association because there was another incident of a pedestrian being hit at Marigold and into urban. So again, people question things all over Saanich about why did they do that there? Why didn't they do it over here where safety is a primary concern, where kids are moving to school, where elderlies need to get to their shopping and mobility? That's an issue. People aren't very thrilled about transit either. And in the sense of that, again, the connectedness of how do I get from some of the areas in Saanich to where I want to go. If I'm rural, how do I get to an urban center? If I'm in an urban center, how do I get to ferries or the airport or other issues like that? So those are really key, not all of them, but key emerging themes, all of it wrapped in safety. People want to know that everything at Saanich is being looked through at a lens for safety and livability. And by that, I mean everything that we've talked about. Livability for people is, can I go to the green spaces around me? Are they being preserved? Can I get there by whatever mode of travel I choose that day, whether it's walking, riding a bike, taking transit, or getting in their car? None of us are people who are moving around on only one of those modes at all times. We are all those users at some times. So it's fascinating to hear from people that, and they're scared almost to say it, right? Oh, no, I don't like the bike lanes. They're not. And it's not about the bike lanes. It's about how the bike lanes have been engineered and the lack of communication around what the grand plan is, regardless of the active transportation plan, which does have pieces not connected. So that's what I'm hearing a lot from people at the doors.
Okay, amazing. Amazing. Don't hear that from any other candidate. So congratulations that you are listening and that you're representing and that there are issues that you can solve. That's the next part we're going to get into.
Okay.
But before we do that, not before we do that. So today's going to focus around transportation. That is one of the pillars on your website, one of the categories, policy categories, and we're going to talk about that. It clearly is paramount on everybody's mind. We're not going to go too deep into it, but certainly And not just identify the problems, which is easy. But,
Yeah.
potential candidates, they identify the problems. That's right. Who's solving these problems? Hollis Hodson is. But before we get into that and your position on the Saanich transportation plans or certainly what you plan to do about it, I got to do a little bit of an editorial here. A tiny,
Oh,
tiny bit of an editorial. I am not running for council. I am not running for anything, but I am an avid e-bike rider. It has literally saved my life in that it has impacted my health dramatically. And I'm also a businessman all my life. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I represent both sides of this equation. So let me start with the biking part first.
okay.
I love these bike lanes. I love them. In fact, I try to only travel on bike lanes because uh, vehicle drivers are dangerous. Uh, of the 5 trips that I try to do per week, if I don't slow down, if I'm not aware of people turning right or turning left, not right is right, I would likely be hit at least 5 times a week. Like it's that prevalent if you're not watching. I try to stay on them. I try to stay off the roads. I love them. I love these bike lanes. Okay, that's one part of me, this part. Then there's this part, the taxpayer part, the business owner part, you can't you this thing about riding everyone a bike, it's a fallacy. You cannot live a life on a bike in Western communities, maybe in Europe, but not here. Okay, unless you live downtown in a condo, it's about 700 square feet, in and amongst all ever stuff, and everything's near you. Your job is near you. This None of us have that life. We need to be in vehicles. Okay. And increasingly it's harder to get around. Used to be, you could sort of write down, well, better not travel between 3 and 5, or better not travel in the morning. Now it's all the time. We just can't get around. And that stretch from the highway to the university, good luck. You could be stuck in 8 friggin' lights there because it's so crowded. The way it is today, it needs to be expanded. And so, and we catch buses downtown. We choose not to drink and drive at any point in our lives. So we take the buses. I'm familiar with transit. Those are great. But are they? They're not a common way that older people travel around. They're still using their vehicles. So sorry for this editorial. I'm interviewing the candidate, but I couldn't help saying what an extraordinarily difficult, emotional issue these bike lanes are. So Hollis, I'm done. I'm not running for anything, but I couldn't help talking about this because it.
Is exactly the type of passion that people bring to the door on this issue. And many of the points that you've raised are points that people raise and they are hard issues. And as you point out, none of us is a single mode of transportation. We are all requiring at different times to move in all directions using all modes. And you mentioned downtown. That's a completely different conversation than trying to move out to Central Saanich or North Saanich or Sydney for the ferries or the airport, right? Challenges. So just to be clear, those are the challenges there. And you also mentioned the e-bike. There's a lot of people not very happy, traditional bikers, about e-bikes. They move faster, they're quite silent, they come up behind people, they make them nervous, and the feedback, just to address, I also use the bike lanes and I feel much safer in them. I don't like the little cement things because they make me feel claustrophobic. And I've heard that from other people. So they just say, I don't use that lane. I go up on the other because I don't want to be going too slow or too fast for whatever's happening around me. But I think traditional bikers, many of them are now feeling that frustration of the e-bikes and the speed that they're moving at. So the other thing with, so bikes tends to always come first, shortly followed by cars. But, you know, the fascinating thing I get people saying is many people have lived all over Canada. You know, we have a large military contingent here, and they'll say, I've lived all over Canada, and I have never seen more of a mess than what I see here. Like, what's going on? Why don't we have proper sidewalks? Like, what is the order matters on this? And this is a great question, because what's been happening at Saanich is the way that this has been going about, and you can hear it in your passionate voice, and when I knock on doors from people, is it's creating divisiveness, because nobody's really sure what's happening. So now it's drivers versus bikes versus pedestrians versus transit riders, and that is not okay. We're all people. We all use different things at different times to get around. There are 4 modes of travel, essentially, that we're all using, and variances on those. You know, it's like saying the small car drivers versus the truck drivers. You know, you can make any group divisive, but it won't serve the outcome. You know, transportation is supposed to bring people together and connect them, not divide them. So it's an interesting phenomena that's happening. What I would want to go, do you have a question?
Yes,
Yeah,
well, I have a reflection,
yes.
because, and I'm sure you'll allude to this in your solutions portion. Part of riding an e-bike is that it's not biking, actually. It's an entire separate category that
Yeah.
requires, because of the weight and the speed and they're not as easy to handle. I don't know what that word is it actually should require some training or even certification of some kind. Yes, do I max out on a strip where there's nobody around? Sure, I do. But when I get around people, I mean, I slow down. If I pass people, I make sure that I ring my bell. If there seems to be some congestion where there's a walker passing somebody with a dog, or even those, and here my complaint, those scooters, which really go fast, they have no limit. You've got to slow down and ring your bell. Now, why is that so difficult to understand for everybody? It would make such a difference if we were trained to do that, and that because it doesn't appear that it's happening naturally by choice. I don't see anyone else doing what I'm doing. If I see people, I slow down. End of story. That's such common sense. It doesn't happen. And
So great point. Many years ago, 20 odd years ago, rule 1 was safety for doing projects, right? That's the #1 ranking criteria. Nobody's clear what it is anymore, but it used to be safety. And within safety was always education. Let's educate. So let me take it away from bikes, so it's not as charged for people. Pedestrians crossing the road at crosswalks or not. There are different rules across Canada, everywhere that you go, on how you're going to cross a street. But I know as a youngster, we were always taught, you walk up to the crosswalk, you stick your arm out, and you wait. You establish eye contact, and then you cross. You just make the assumption the cars are trying to hit you. And when your arm goes out, it stops. We have people from all over Canada that land in Saanich. And you know what? That still works. I still do it. It's an excellent thing. And it signals to the driver, I'm about to cross the road. It's really hard to drive, ride, or do whatever if the pedestrian has a headset on and they can't hear anything and they're kind of in their zone wandering, and they may not have checked. And this is also true of electric vehicles. You know, you can't hear them. I notice now the next gen has a really space age sound that they make, which is fantastic, because now you at least know they're coming. But to get back to the question at hand, which is most important, is how would I want to affect change in Saanich? I would want to bring more planning into this, have people sit around the table with all modalities and do it in like a brainstorming fashion, like allow people, give them space to feel safe, to comment on the things that are important, and look about addressing it as a connective issue. In other words, is it an 80% acceptability for walkers, bikers, given that nobody gets 100% at the end of the day on any agreement that you're doing? Agreement creation means coming together, doing some give and take. And at the end of the day, if everybody walks away somewhat happy, somewhat pleased, and feeling like they can live with that outcome, you've arrived at a good agreement and a good solution. I'm not sure that a lot of people, when I'm knocking on doors from what I've heard, are even understand what's happening, let alone how it's happening, which then highlights the fact that the communications coming out of Saanich, if they think they're excellent, aren't. That's not a question, that's a statement. And so how are we, when we're shutting down the voices of people, instead of bringing more people to the table and allowing them to vocalize what's important to them, are we going to do that? And you mentioned elderly people, they want to drive their cars. Let's be clear, elderly people probably have, for the most part, an issue. And I had an accident many years ago, and I went to take a bus because I couldn't drive. And it was the most excruciating, painful thing I've ever encountered. And I really have a healthy respect now from people across, again, this comes into it, inclusivity, respect, making sure we're being kind and understanding why people might still be in their vehicles, that is the way that they're getting around, that transit isn't an option for them. At the same time, if we don't have sidewalks, I met a 103-year-old lady the other day, B. Oh, shout out to her. And she's got the walker with her dog. But, she's pretty limited, she says, on where she can go because there aren't sidewalks. So are we really supporting everyone from the tiny little person in a stroller with the mom and the dog, or a bike, another one learning to bike? No. And so my question for Saanich, and what I would hope if I got on there, was to say to people, so before we implement these things or run whatever modeling tool we're using that may or may not be a good modeling tool, how about we get out there, stand on the street and talk to neighbors? Same amount of time, same amount of investment, but you are now boots on the ground walking and saying, hey, is this really functional in this area? Is it improving things? The framework for every single question that's asked for a solution should be, out of engineering in particular, are we leaving things better for Saanich and its future generations when we do this project? Because if we're not, and we're creating frustration and we're impacting livability and we're frustrating people, and again, communication, I said this in our last one, the biggest problem with communication is assuming it already happened, right? And that, I think, when I knock on the doors, people are sensing that's not it. So I'm hoping when the new council is elected that we get a fulsome group, that we can have conversations. It only takes a couple of us to get a motion on the floor to talk about it, to then chat with staff, be approachable, and perhaps give them better tactical guidelines and a framework to enable them to come up with solutions that cause transportation to increase connectivity and communication and connect people in the community. I mean, that's what transportation is all about. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit challenging to see where we're at today.
Well, I tell you, really well thought out, very articulate, very human-based, respectful of all of the different components of what transportation is these days. And it really is so many different things. Hollis, this is amazing. And I cannot understand for a second, in my personal opinion, not yours, why anyone would not vote for Hollis Hodson for Saanich Council come October. So can't wait to hear next week's session, what people are saying at the doors. It's very hot, Hollis, this next coming week. Be
Oh, I
careful,
know.
drink
It's
lots of
so
water.
fleeting. I know. I'm gonna have to start having a knapsack or something with
But
water
thank
in
you
it.
very much. Till next week, you take care.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.